For those of you I haven't met before, my name's Stephen. So I guess about 10 years ago, started an edtech company called Seneca. We grew that to 15 million users and then sold it in 2022. After that, then decided to start an Overbook, thus the enormous cubes here. Main event tonight, Husayn. I'll probably hand over to you to introduce yourself, but obviously part of one of the biggest tech companies in the UK and Onfido, a huge success story, and then building again with Ollo. So I'll let you introduce yourself quickly, but first of all, yeah, huge thanks for joining us.
Yeah, hello. Very, very good to be here. I founded Onfido with two co-founders back in 2012. Things were a little bit different then. Maybe one of the things we can get into, and that's identity verification. You take a photo of your passport, your face, and you're signing up to a bank and car rental and all of those. We grew it to $100 million in ARR, and in 2020, a new team was brought in to help sell the company, and they eventually sold about 3 years ago. I took a break, and I've since been building a new startup called Ollo, which essentially is an agent builder for non-technical team members, where we match you with young, forward-deployed engineering light type of people on a Zoom, on a one-to-one call every week. They help you essentially demystify agent building to help people get going. That's a bit about me.
Brilliant. So I guess let's dive in right at the start. Obviously, we have a vague northern connection. So I guess if you could give everyone a kind of background of like from the very start and day one, kind of how you got to here today.
Yes. So I'm from a place called Manchester. It's up north. Andy Burnham's making it more popular again, which is kind of really nice. Born in Manchester, I'm one of five. So we're a family of seven. My father's Iranian, so at the age of 1, we moved back to Iran. And then at the age of 10, we moved back here, back to the UK. In part because my mother was accused of being a spy. And it was like a surprise to us. What was really surprising to us was that it turned out she actually was a spy. Which I'm only kidding, she wasn't. But in Iran, it's pretty normal. Half the population have accused the other half of being a spy at one point or another. So grew up from the age of 10 to 18 in Manchester and got to go to uni. And at uni, I looked into the identity verification issue a little bit more because when I turned 10, we moved to the UK, my parents struggled to prove their identity, to open a bank account or to rent in their own name. So that kind of stayed with me. I thought this is broken and silly, and that the future will be some sort of experience where you're doing it all online. And I met one of my technical co-founders. He was a computer science sort of student, and he showed me how narrow AI, computer vision machine learning, can in theory do a better job of verifying IDs and faces than the human sort of face-to-face bank-based experience. So I thought, okay, this is great. I'm going to make you my best friend. I'm going to work on this together, and that was essentially the beginning journey of Onfido.
And I guess, how did you take that kind of early concept that you had, and then I guess your technical co-founder or co-founders, and then how did that evolve over time into an idea? Because I'd say, I don't know, identity verification with like AML, KYC, all that stuff now feels a given, but I guess back then it wasn't nearly as prominent a problem.
So this timing matters in startups a lot. And sometimes you're at the right place at the right time. If you look at like Apple's history, that same cohort in that year, and there's many, many examples. Uber is another one where the technological building blocks, internet connectivity, for us in 2012, internet connectivity got stronger. Camera phones became better quality because you need a good quality image of like an ID and your face. And servers became accessible, AWS and others, so you could actually run a relatively straightforward, like machine learning model in a scalable way, and an affordable way, I should say. So the technological building blocks came about, which is easy to know now or like to point to, but it wasn't as obvious at the time. But when we got started, your question on how did we go about making it happen, it helps that we were at university, which means kind of like we didn't have to worry too much about costs. And many startups come out to unis because of that reason. You're able to meet and talk to and like put co-founders together. And that is overlooked. I think the special thing for those who are still students or still at university is you will never be surrounded by so many talented, unemployed people ever again in your life. And so you should use that. You don't lose much by starting a company, applying for these competitions, accelerators, that goodness knows there are many of them, because at the very least you're going to learn. And who knows, sometimes like things can take off. So we struggled in 2012 because there weren't many startups. I could essentially count the notable ones on maybe two hands. TransferWise, we were just talking about the T-building. There were one, a company called Due Diligence was another, Go Cardless was. There weren't many, but there were enough to be an inspiration that is kind of possible. The challenge was to raise money in 2013. I went and I pitched to every single angel that I could find in Oxford, and none of them would they would all meet with me for coffee, but none of them would invest. And I later realized that they kind of get a kick out of meeting a young startup, but they're all former financiers. For 60 years, they've been trained not to take risk. So why are they now going to suddenly take a risk? So I realized the importance of qualifying investors. So my first question is, how many investments have you made in the last 12 months? That helped. But to finish, we struggled to raise money. So we raised £12,000 from what was called ISIS Innovation. They rebranded for obvious reasons. It's now called Oxford Innovation. And that's an invoice-based investment that pays after 90 days. Surely that's criminal, right? So I had my little funds available, I would pay, and then I would have to send the invoice to them. 90 days later, they would pay. So talk about cash flow management. And then 6 months later, raised 20K from the business school, and then raised more thereafter. But the struggle with raising was we were told that these investors needed 2 miracles to happen for this identity verification vision to come about. The first is a behavioral one, where it was hard to believe that people would actually take a photo of their most sensitive possession, like their ID, on a smartphone. That was hard to imagine. And at the time, I remember they said, people won't be taking photos of themselves. We call it selfies now, but I just can't see that happening. And a behavioral miracle was a hard sell to buy into. And then the technological one was, I can't envisage machine learning do a better job of verifying IDs better than the human eye. There's always been the human eye, and why would some technology do it? And we couldn't prove that either because it was only in theory. And you kind of need tens of thousands of IDs to build a model. And the legitimate question was, where are you going to get tens of thousands of IDs from? Which we didn't have an answer to. So I don't blame them for not investing. They're very sorry, the ones that didn't. But our first investor made a 320x return. So they're pretty pleased. But the environment at the time, not many investors, and it was kind of, the whole startup thing was new. And things have changed a lot, which is kind of the best time now, I think, to be building.
I guess 2 questions from that. One is, were you studying at the same time as raising the 12K and the 20K? Because I guess you obviously have stuff like the Teal Fellowship, where it's just drop out, give up, and then start a company, versus actually continuing to study and it being prudent or not prudent to drop out or complete studies. And then I guess the second one is, how did you get those first 10,000 IDs?
So, yeah, having a Middle Eastern parent means dropout is not an option. So I didn't even think of dropping out. I graduated, and then August of 2012, I was able to work on it full-time. It was part-time until then. Okay. And yes, I went full-time and then started to raise. I feel the difference now is that you can actually start and scale a successful AI company, or any sort of company, frankly, most companies, without much funding at all. And you can leverage some APIs and have, with a bit of work, have the same capabilities that would have normally cost you hundreds of thousands, if not millions of pounds to get to. So that's why there's so much excitement and hype in the startup ecosystem, especially at universities. That's why YC is spending more time there. That's why some of these funds are spending more time there. It's because the cost to build is now gone, essentially collapsed, which is wonderful. It had gone down for us, and the whole fintech wave, it used to cost tens of millions to start a fintech. And then virtual licenses and the regulatory changes, and again, cloud computing just collapsed that to a few million. And now it's low hundreds of thousands. So that part helped quite a bit. Remind me of your question?
How did you get the first 10,000?
The first 10,000, yeah. So this was the bit where I hadn't figured out at the time. And I only learned by doing, right? And this is another part of startup. You just start. Don't theorize too much. Just get going. And then you learn by doing, which is the same story of almost the majority of, in my mind, successful startups. I read a stat somewhere that 96% of companies that IPO started out doing something very different to where they ended with the IPO. LinkedIn and so many, Facebook, so many different examples. So the 10,000 IDs, I asked my parents. My mother gave me her ID, but no one else would give me their ID. They'd be like, what do you want this for? So I had an N of two, my own and hers. So it was a bit of a problem. So we found a product to sell, which is a database search, like a criminal record check. There's £25 for a basic criminal record check that schools and many industries need. And all the providers charge £10 for it, for like the admin fee. And my sort of light bulb moment was, we'll just undercut that. We'll just charge £5. And we charged £5 to do criminal record checks. It became very manual. I started doing it and it was like, hey, I can't be like typing away like a monkey every night, like doing this. So let's put this on an API. And we did it on an API. And it became a very successful product. So it grew to like over £1 million of revenue because we were doing these database searches at half the price of everyone else. But what that meant was these criminal record checks took 24 hours to come back, which gave us the ability to manually check these IDs over 24 hours. So we got the sample, we were able to build a model, but it was for a completely different product. And so that's how we got our first low thousands and then tens of thousands. And then that helped us build a simple enough product to go in 2013 and 2014 to service the trust marketplace. This is on-demand cleaners, nannies, tutors, blah, blah, type car sharing, where they now were just only ID check use cases. Yeah. But because we had some traffic, we were able to catch some of the fraud and had like a 10% automation rate on those.
How many of the criminal background check reviews did you do you think, over the year? And then how long did that product last? Or does it still exist today and it was never grandfathered?
So in 2013/14, I personally would have done 200 or 300, but then we started hiring team members who started to do that. Yeah. It was end of 2014, we had on average generating just over £1 million of criminal record checks and sub £50,000 of identity revenue. And we raised an investment round at like an £8 million valuation, and the VCs had put an 8x multiple on our revenue, right? But they weren't sophisticated enough to understand that this is pass-through revenue. So £25 goes to the government. We only take £5. So if the government fee went from £25 to 1p, our revenue would collapse by 80%. But at the time, again, they were not sophisticated enough to recognize or to classify what pass-through revenue is. You remember the on-demand bubble in 2014, where the VCs, many of them in this city, who celebrate themselves for being very, very like intelligent, they were giving like cleaning businesses $500 million valuations. Or there's my favorite one was valet parking apps in San Francisco. 1 hour parking costs about $25. They would add $2 on top, and then they would say their ARR is like $5 million, which it was, but 4.9 million of that is just the car park fees. So anyway, we raised a round off of, frankly, the government fees, which suddenly made me realize this VC game is actually a wonderful game, as long as you have the right pitch. But the problem we had was after getting the money, we told them we don't want this crappy database business because it's just a commodity on an API. What we really want is this identity business that is like only 50, 60,000 pounds of revenue, but this is the future. And there was a bit of pushback. They said no, and we kind of cut it anyway. But your question was, did we grandfather it? We had some contracts that we had to honor, and we sort of did. But it ended up taking until 2015 for us to fully exit data and just fully exclusive on identity, which is a real shame. Like if we'd raised good money early, like we probably would have done if we were in the US, we would have had like a 2-year head start without all that distraction around getting revenue to get some money to then build the product that we really cared about.
Do you remember who the first customer was for the trust product that you thought would be the future?
Yes, back to the T building is sort of Teddle. It's like a cleaning company that became Hassel that sold to Handy. And Alex the Pledge, she's now the Treasury Entrepreneur Advisor, terrific founder. They were, at the time, there's also Housekeep, which is still around. Avi's like a successful founder. Avin, very successful founder. We met at I met Alex at the Google campus on Bun Hill Row. They were our first clients, and they were one of the very first on-demand marketplace clients. We spent 3 to 4 months with them. They did a good job. Like really, the advantage you have as a startup is that you bend over backward and you really like impress. And I personally did most of those checks, and I had to make sure that they were really happy. The second client we had through their referral was a company that we all know by Deliveroo. So they were a tiny team at the time, but they too have drivers that need to be verified, which sort of both of these companies at the time went pretty exponential.
How did you price the contract that you sold to Deliveroo initially? Because surely at that point you'll take any revenue to a degree.
Yeah, so you have to practice your poker face, right? Because anything they'll give you, you'll take. But you have to square it with like keeping the lights on and making sure investors like accept it and so forth. I can't remember the specifics of what we were charging, but it would have been discounted to like the industry average, like by far. There wasn't much. The database searches had like benchmarks, which we discounted quite a bit. But identity was not. There wasn't many alternatives, so that helped us. But by 2016, Deliveroo alone turned into £1 million contract. But they in turn, 2014 to 2016 was like a very different company. Like they really were skyrocketing. And 2015 we signed what is now Revolut, and again 2016 they started to like balloon as well. But we only were able to win those contracts because 2 or 3 years earlier we started doing these checks manually and building a little bit of an advantage and expertise and competence around remote identity verification, which really took off in 2016. But had we not started, there would have been other competitors who would have like come and beaten us.
At what point did you see competitors getting funded, where someone's obviously seen the market later than you, but then VCs start backing them? Like, is that 2016, 2017, or was it a lot later?
So we ended up with 5 companies, Onfido and 4 others, with 90% market share, and that's still the case today, 15 years later. 4 of those started in 2012, us, and then a 5th one, Veriv, started in 2015. So it's Jumio, Authentics, and they were called ID now. They've since been acquired by Mytech. So we were like the 5 providers. But by 2016, because our approach was, but they were in different geographies.
Yep.
Jumio's in the US. Jumio raised, I want to say 100 million, may have been more, by one of the Facebook co-founders and Andreessen, like a top 10 whatever firm. And this was in 2014. And so some of our investors and others are like, guys, you should like pack up. And, you know, big investor and big in the US is like, why on earth would I pack up? I've got a product that does what they're doing, and they just got like a 300 million valuation. I'm unpacking now, like, and in fact, timing and luck matters quite a bit, because when they raised, we were going out to the market to raise 1.75, and because we were confident and we were all in, partly through desperation, partly through excitement, and just like a mix. We, instead of going back to the investors we were talking to, who no one was like pulling the trigger, right? They're saying, oh, well now, based on our conversation, can we now just give us $1 million and we'll prove it? We went back and we said, guys, you've heard the news. We have now more interest. We want to raise $3 million, and that made them move faster. Now, I won't comment on how accurate or not those statements were, but the VC thing is very much a pitch gig and creating momentum and excitement in them, even if there's not always momentum and excitement in you.
It can be easier to ask for more money in some cases.
Yes. So if you have some who are interested, every passing week will diminish their interest. You get them hooked by actually getting a term sheet or showing, like signing a big contract, getting momentum. What we said, we went back and we said, well, now we want more money, which in their heads thought, oh, this must be really good, so let's move faster. And that's why it goes back to my point around, they're not terribly sophisticated.
How did the team evolve after you raised that kind of round? So at what point was the inflection fastest? And then how did you decide how to split responsibilities between you and your co-founders? So 2015 was we raised our A, 3 million. And by 2016, we'd gotten rid of the
product we didn't want. We were getting some momentum, and we started signing some big contracts, and we started to get good revenue from existing customers. So 2016, when we started to really like take off, but all the lessons from being lean and agile and all the things that we learned in the early days, we kept. So 2016, it became like professionalizing the team. We went from 30, 40 to 50 people, brought in some more senior execs, and frankly, we did spend a lot of time. I moved to the US, spent a lot of time trying to break into the US market. We were pretty clear on what we wanted to achieve and like the milestones and internal messaging, because the identity verification thing is straightforward. Like, we're not focusing on anything else. We just want government IDs, facial biometrics, best in fraud, fastest turnaround time, best coverage globally. And so I'd say, and I see when I look at different startups, the ones that you have pre-product market fit, product market fit, and scale. When you're at product market fit, which we were in 2016 or so, you really, really need to get very good at just narrowing the focus and get everyone laser focused on that. Because there's just too much competition. Now, I would argue there's like 10x, if not more, intensity of competition that there would have been in like 10 years ago. So if you want to even have a slim chance of winning, you have to be really ruthlessly focused. And we partly because of my co-founder, our COO, drove that. And I had our third co-founder, technical co-founder, like we were all aligned on driving that. And I think that is what really set us apart. Because at that time, some competitors that we had were trying different things, which they really shouldn't have. And then by 2017, we got to a point where our investment was technology, machine learning, computer vision, alongside human expertise. So we had 1,100 human agents in India and Vietnam via BPOs, manually processing IDs. When our machine learning failed, or we weren't sure if the passport is stained, is that because it's fraudulent or is that because it went through a washing machine? We had these humans process those and label to make the machine learning model better. So we called it the hybrid approach, tech plus human. Some of our competitors started to boast that they were only technology. One of them was boasting that they're only human. Ours, like the client couldn't care less. The client just wants these metrics, and how we deliver it, we explain it to them, and that kind of paid off. So by the end of 2017, we'd hit the metric that I was most interested in, which was a competitive trial win rate. Us and our 4 competitors, we got to an 80% competitive trial win rate. From every 5 contracts that we had, where there was an active competitive bid, we won 4 in 5 of those. So then 2018, 19, and 20, we pretty much won 4 in 5 of every bid that came about. So we kind of cleaned up essentially all of that space. Well, 80% of these trials.
I guess if we rewind, when you're hiring the senior execs, what was your hit rate? Because I have never ever succeeded and would love advice. And then secondly, when you're moving to the US, how well did the product map? How did different IDs in states and all that work? Was that hell or was that actually quite reusable?
So the execs one was hard because in my naive mind, this is my first job, right? And it's going quite well. This is like 2017, got some more money. Heck, we can now afford the fancy folk. And we hired well, and we were very good with equity and share options. So when the company sold, 1/5 of the company was owned by the team, outside of founders and investors. And that 20% is relatively high. It's 21%. It's actually quite high. Most companies don't get anywhere near 8%, never mind 21%. But if you want world-class talent, you really should be giving equity, and we give equity to every single person. Execs, we had some, and it worked out really well. From Apple, Amazon, I've always had good experience from Amazon. Facebook, and never from Apple really. We tried, but regardless. So we had successes, but we also have had ones that really didn't work out. The ones that really don't work out, the telltale sign is the moment they join, they want to hire someone underneath them and have every report go to that one person, and they're not vertically agile. So my best execs are the ones that are very vertically agile. If they're in tech, they're like code as well as manage a team, as well as they're just that means they have insight, they have depth. Same with the salesperson, right? Your chief revenue officer, if they had to, can they put a sales deck together and go and close themselves, right? They have an org of 120 in their growth sales team, but are they leading by example? And the ones where they came and we just got excited by their title and the companies that they've been at, and neglected how vertically agile and hungry are they, we struggled. So we look for hungry, humble, and high potential. Whenever we kind of like laxed or relaxed a little bit of that, it didn't work out. But then you asked about the US experience.
Yeah.
So the Americans, they don't class non-Americans as legitimate companies. So you ought to, you really, in my opinion, we're a B2B company. I moved there myself. Went out to LA, but essentially working at LA in the weekends and then in San Francisco during the week. So be present, like be there. They certainly like the British accent. So they don't understand the Mancunian one, so we're fine to be more non-Mancunian if necessary, so they can understand what you're saying. But more importantly, the best thing about American startups is if you do well, whatever you do, they amplify. If you're not impressing, they will. You're not going to get anywhere. If you do impress, they'll tell their friends. And this is a shame in the UK. This historically has not really happened. When you get that now in the UK, it's usually because they have an American on their team. So this feedback effect in the US has helped us. So I went, and our first client in the US was a company called Turo. Turo is like car rental. It's like an Airbnb where you rent your car. And we did a lost, we had the contract. It was, for some IDs, it was like break even, but some IDs, it was essentially, we were making a loss. And, but we took that relationship and built it, and then started to sort of sign more customers. Hired from America, but my experience is get your young grads from the UK, get them on a 3-4 year visa to the US, ramp them. They'll always, in my experience, outperform the locals because of the culture and the dedication, actually, more than anything else. They understand the company culture, having been in the HQ. And the US became our largest market in 2018 by size because it's just everything there is like 10x, if not 20x.
So I guess you're winning 4 in 5 contracts. You've cracked the US, which is, I'd say, pretty tough if you've tried it. What then happens that evolves towards a sale? Like, what are the key milestones and the key, I guess, junctures where things went well, things went badly, and kind of the learnings from that?
So the good, the bad, and the ugly. The bad and the ugly goes back to the investors, truth be told. So in 2020, we had $100 million in ARR, 100% year-on-year growth, doubling year-on-year, 74% gross margin, 8.2 culture or pecan score out of 10. So like team are relatively happy. And we're about 520 people. And COVID hits in March. So we raised $100 million at the beginning, well, essentially March 2020. Then COVID hits and identity multiples go through the roof because now you're in a like remote identity needing world and you're like one of only 5 remote identity verification companies. So the investors that we had essentially saw that the identity multiples, Okta, which is like another identity company, hits 20x on their revenue multiple. So they figured we'd just done around that 500 million valuation. So they did the math and they figured, heck, we can get 2 billion for this company. So they sacked me and they brought in a CEO who was supposed to IPO the company. And over a 3-year period, our 100% year-on-year growth went down to 5% year-on-year, which is not good. Like the local bar here is growing at more than 5% year-on-year, which is a shame. Yeah, and that's because within 12 months, some of the best talents left or were let go as well.
So I guess the board have replaced you and brought someone else in day to day. Like how long? Like what are you doing during that period? Are you just like relaxing? Obviously, it's probably not the best time to relax in COVID.
Oh, when I was sacked?
Yeah.
No,
like,
well,
what does one do?
Yeah, so this is my first job, so I don't know what those without a job do. So naturally, I went online to see what my entitlements were. I'm kidding, but it's a Mancunian joke. You wouldn't get it, but it was, in all seriousness, like it took me a week to reconcile. We've got one Mancunian in the audience. It took me like a week to reconcile.
Yeah.
And I always sleep very easy before exams, whatever. But I did not for a few days.
Yeah.
And my mind was just rushing through and processing all the to-do items that I had. This advisor in this location, this supplier, this person I helped with this contract, I'd like promised them share options, or this person was due for like a promotion. It's like dozens and dozens and dozens of things, but I just had to like live through it. So it took me about a week to get back to like sleeping easy. It wasn't that I was like devastated because it's out of my hands. I should add that the first approach to trying to exit me was a bit too rough. So I had to go back and threaten them, and then it became a bit more amicable. So I was happy with where we left it on the amicable front. But I learned not to trust investors, believe it or not. But so it wasn't like I was given like a sweet deal to some extent. If I'd have known they're going to crash the company, I would have like fought and like stayed on. But yeah, it took a week to get over it. And then I figured I can spend some time to go and catch up with friends. And then I realized I don't have any because it's been 10 years. So that was tough. But then I checked on Facebook and then I realized, heck, yes, they're still on Facebook. But then it was COVID, so that didn't work out. So after a few months, I went on the dating sites, went on the clearance section, found someone, and we toured and we went. I was on the clearance section. We got a license. This is towards the end of COVID. We toured most of the castles in the UK.
Decent.
Yeah, I've seen them now, but we've got some great castles. That during COVID it was actually a good thing to do. I took a good year like properly off, and I'm glad I did it because you kind of need the hunger back if you want to start your next thing. You know,
what's the best castle in the UK?
Well, this is not one that you get on the Heritage Foundation, so sign up anyway because it's a charity and it's good. It's actually Warwick Castle, right? They've got this like bird show that's out of this world. Yeah.
And I guess in terms of the eventual sale of Onfido, are you on the board and getting access to information at this point, or was the
No, I was a pretty rough exit. Yeah.
Okay.
So this happens more often than you may think, and founders don't openly talk about it. They do to their therapists, which helps. And the therapist usually say, well, don't keep it to yourself. And you try to explain to the therapist, well, I've signed 20 pages of non-disclosure. So I can't. You can talk to a chatbot if you want, but it's not always necessarily private either. But regardless, the thing is, there weren't grounds to like exit me. Hence, the way they essentially, what happened was that they just made it really, well, half of my exec team said that they're going to walk unless there's something more amicable, which is essentially what happens. But I mean, my new thing, and like I'm mostly self-funding or semi-self-funding, and I'm all about control and board and all that good stuff because I've learned my lesson. The good thing is, part of my exits, there were some agreements made to make sure everyone was going to be kept sweet in the sense of like an exit, and there's not going to be a scenario where like the ordinary shareholders get wiped out. And there were protections in place. But it was a shame. Yeah, and I'm okay now though.
And then I guess going again, how long did you take off, and how rigorously did you think about what to do? Because I basically took a weekend off because I just had nothing in my life and just started again. Just wondering like how aggressively you dive into it or not.
So I registered a company the following weekend, but I didn't have a name or an industry or anything. So I typed as new MN. It doesn't really, if you just crash the keyboard, you come up with a name. But it was supposed to be New Media Network. But I didn't know if it was going to be media or not. So I thought, okay, to hell with it. Just call it new MN. Because no one will know what that means. And then I went on a discovery journey. So I had the sense that it has to be an AI. And it has to be like a big problem and an exciting one to get a team together. All I care about the most is like, let's get something exciting for so I can hire the world's best. And we run towards this target that we all care about. And then I tried and thought through a few areas. And as you do, I thought they were brilliant. But then I would find the founders in that space and I'd go and like brainstorm with them. And if they said this is an awful idea, I'd ask for more of their time. So we're lucky here today because Timo's in the room. Timo's the founder of FanBytes. Let's hear it for Timo. So I went to see him on the first iteration of this, which is essentially an AI coach learning creator type of play. And he kept saying how awful this was. So I went on long walks with him, and he was very generous with his time. And I refined it. Eventually ended up like the Ollo pitch now is more or less 18 months. It's been like this lane, which is AI deployment for non-technical people. But it's certainly very different to where it started.
And then you obviously have an ability to grow, sell, and scale in the US, which I guess by conventional wisdom would be, I don't know, higher multiple or higher TAM than UK and Europe. But obviously you're building here in London, UK, Europe. What's your view on the kind of standard kind of parlance around US companies versus European companies?
Way, way overrated. The things are very different to 3-4 years ago. And the main difference is AI. And that is, it statistically took $300 million to build a $1 billion company, historically. And if you want to raise $300 million, you typically have no choice but to go and raise from US funds, which often want to see some US revenue, at least 10%, sometimes 20, 30%, which by definition means like the winners end up being coming out of the US. But now because of AI, a whole new wave of startups, Novelbook being a great example, are able to achieve so much more with like a fraction of what it used to take. So maybe a team of 50, it would have taken maybe 250 people to achieve the same outcomes like 5 years ago, which means you've cut the cost required to build special companies by a great deal. So the US has had has 4 times more financial capital than all of Europe. And in my mind, the cost of building is now less than 25% of what it was 4 or 5 years ago. So in my mind, it's lost its edge or its unfair advantage. So it's like a bit more of a level playing field. So second, what do you look at? You look at talent. That's all that really matters. The best talent building the right things at the right time. And Europe, which is spoiled with great talent. Talent that is accessible, right? So in London versus San Francisco, yes, San Francisco has more AI talent. But have you ever tried hiring in San Francisco? Like no one here is legitimately, with no offense, is going to be able to successfully hire great A-star talent. We just came out of the World Cup, right? And you've seen these sport teams and it takes like one Messi or like one star player to really, really make a difference in a competitive game. And those 10x engineers, in my experience, genuinely make that kind of difference. So the question becomes, how can I access that 10x talent? In my mind, you're much, much more likely to do that in Europe, especially in London, than you are in San Francisco. So if I look at, now that I can build a special company with a fraction of the capital, financial capital, the human capital that I need, there are more accessible AI talents than here. And all I care about, frankly, is what's accessible to me. And third is essentially, there's like a whole vibe shift where London has got so many things going for it. So I already, as of last year, on GitLab, there's more code shipped in Europe than the US. And in my mind, the ratio of unicorns coming out of Europe is going to close on that of the US. And that's why it's great to build here. It doesn't mean you don't set up a team in New York and sell into the States, but your tech HQ in particular, in my mind, especially if you already have a network here, this is the place to be. Hence the AI Hub and these are all these networks.
And then last one from me, because I'll leave some time for Q&A. But I guess as someone who kind of sits, I'd say, semi-agnostically or at least fully agnostically on top of different models, different foundational models and different companies, like what would you say between the closed source kind of frontier labs versus open source and the trends you see there?
So for our platform, we're LLM agnostic and GLM is popular. You usually probably ought to use the private or certainly the frontier models if it's finance, if it's research, if it's coding. The majority of other use cases, you can go for an open source option that gives you just as good results. What you really want to do is invest in your team, especially your non-technical team, because the technical ones are comfortable with your non-technical team, to give them the basic skills to essentially be able to pick the right appropriate models and improve their agents and skills over time.
Brilliant. Any questions in the audience?
Hi, my name is Swapnil. I run a company which uses biometric technology to secure cars. I have a question for you. What was the toughest moment in your career when you were building a company, apart from the exit in between that start?
I guess, yeah, if anyone can't hear, what's the toughest moment? It's probably a couple.
The most tragic moment was my exit. It happened at the end of a board meeting, and that was like the best board meeting we had. It was like our traction. It was a bit of a surprise. But startups are a series of like fires, and one must not get caught up or have a thing like a negative view, but it's constant. The long and short of it is, my perspective is like, you got people, processes, and priorities, and people is by far and away the most important factor. So if you hire well and you help them develop and essentially do their life's best work, you're kind of good and you're fine. So the worst instances would have been where we got that wrong, and where essentially the consequences of the cost, we could always like draw back to a bad decision on a hire or the wrong team, and that we kind of had a gut feeling, but we didn't course correct soon enough. So we had a hire in San Francisco. I kind of knew he's building a case to sue us, and I'd kind of like logged it with a team member to resolve. 8 months later, lo and behold, that was missed, and he came back with a lawsuit and things of that nature, which was manageable. But those are the types of things that, you know, you really get frustrated by. But you have to look at the glass half full. Like, it's all, I had not been for Onfido, I'd be playing video games in someone's basement, right? So you got to put it in perspective.
It's nice to learn. I had a startup in the US and moved to UK. I was in California for a couple of years, so it's good.
Yeah.
It's nice to learn.
Exactly.
Any more questions?
Hi, I'm Payman. We are building a governance layer and compliance for AI for regulated industries, and I was following your posts about what's needed to be around compliance and governance these days. There are two avenues happening. Companies invest a lot on building better LLM models, and another part investing into bring a layer on top of them to become compliance and regulated. What do you think is the main trend that's happening?
So the big thing probably, I'd say you're in a good space, and the things that's going to happen in the next year or two is companies that start to get their acts together and actually deploy AI in an effective way. They've got the right infrastructure, the right tooling, the right training. They'll suddenly come to a point where we're like, okay, we're 1,000 people and we've got like hundreds of agents running, a lot of duplicate stuff. Who's responsible for what and what's happening? And at some point, someone will point out like, you need a proper governance layer. Who is accountable? Who's responsible? Who manages what looks good? Who manages, do we need all these agents? Let's just have a few that work well as opposed to like a numbers game. The frontier models want to encourage token maxing. It's not what, it's counter to your interest. A lot of agent builders are trying to do agent maxing, which I'm not always so interested. So I'm biased, but I would say over time we're going to give a greater premium to platforms that come and are much more a fit. Those are the right level of agents and skills for what needs to happen internally, and ultimately who are upskilling and training your team so that you're controlling compliance and essentially your AI destiny yourself. You're not getting a third party in to then leave and you're forever dependent on them.
Hi, I'm Mahan, also Iranian, not a spy for the record. I really
If you say so.
Yeah, if you say so, I want to. I really enjoyed listening to your story. Very curious about if you have any tips of finding the 10x engineers. How do you go about it?
There you go. That's a good question. So it's exactly what a spy would ask. You are, it is tough. So first thing is to work on an exciting problem, right? Even if you're not doing something exciting, figure out how and why it's exciting. So some could argue identity checks can be compliant, or it can be like boring, but not really. It's like stopping fraud. And who likes fraud? Everyone's either has been a victim or knows someone who's had their identity stolen. So if you talk to an engineer and you get them to emotionally feel the pain, they're more likely to be hooked. The best engineers also want to work on the most complex problems. They're lifelong learners. They want to be pushed and stretched. So hey, come and help us, because the smartest people in the world in the fraud factories are trying to hack us, like we're antivirus and they're the virus. So come and let's band together and stop that fraud. And that's how we energize engineers. I would say your top tech talent you really need to recognize and you need to reward them with equity. That just kind of goes without saying. And hopefully at a co-founder level, you have someone technical. They should obsess and spend time evenings and weekends headhunting, personally, as a technical co-founder, to find people with the right profile, right history, right experience. They should read Reddit blogs, they should read different sort of monitoring repositories and find those who might be amazing talent, often at a startup which is failed, and pitch them, have coffee with them, and encourage them to join. In doing so, essentially, just like the recruitment cycle is like a constant thing, because you'd recognize in a football team you have one Messi, you need to be a scout, and that's a fundamental. And you can't, for every 5 to 10, you're only going to get one. So we did that. I'd like to think a lot. My co-founder, he was just a magician at this. So we needed a CTO, and for 2 years we courted and turned an advisor out of our CTO. Ended up being Dan. He became our CTO for 3 years. At the time, he was the number one CTO in Europe. So he was the CTO of Criteo, which was at the time the largest B2B the only B2B unicorn, or the first B2B unicorn in Europe. So he eventually joined because heck, these are persistent guys. It's been 2 years and I've been an advisor and so forth. So he joined. He was with us for 3 years, and he's now on the Revolut board. I was like the tech board member. So it's an example of like seeing this in action. My own team of 14, 7 are former founders. Founders are tricky people to work with, right? Most of you, if not all of you, are founders. So you probably, if you're being honest with yourselves, you're not great employees. So you need to find founders, in my mind, who are like essentially have that humility and are like comrades and like team members over like those who aren't. Yeah, but it's tough. And naturally, once you get them and you attract them, then you can run tests and have them spend half a day or a day or two with you in the office. And then you get a good vibe sense on. And in fact, engineering is probably the easiest one to know if the person's special or not, because you can see them in action. And a tip here is don't give them assignments like you would a few years ago to fill and bring to you, because they use AI for that, believe it or not. But when you get them in the office and here's like a 90-minute assignment, like build out an agent and talk me through how you thought through that, that is where you can get. And that means they may not be super accomplished, but that their way of thinking is expressed.
I think we've got time for 2 more. Let's go one at the back.
Hi, my name's Guy. How do you think about training the non-technical guys or non-technical team within your company now?
Yeah. So Ollo as a whole company was designed for that. So what you tend to find is that technical people are comfortable with AI and beyond. And that's why more than half of all of AI revenue is going towards coding. But a lot of the domain experts are non-technical. And they're just expected to know how to use it, and they don't. So our approach is not, one approach is like a theory-based one, it could be a boot camp, it could be like a training course. It doesn't really fly with domain experts that are time poor and like used to doing stuff. For us, it's you learn best by doing. So for us, it's like every week there's a half an hour session with a co-build rep, essentially where the 3 things that you do on the call. First, you talk about what your problem statements are, use cases. You identify an agent that ought to be built or a skill that ought to be developed. Then the second stage is you actually co-build together. Then the third thing is you run it, you test it, you improve it, and then next week go into another one. And after the 4th, 5th, 6th session, you kind of usually you got, once it's been demystified, you're kind of good to go. So I would look at those who can sit with you. You learn by doing. If you're not using a great provider like Ollo, the second best is to find an internal, can be a technical person that's comfortable with agents, and tell them, look, I want to book an hour with you. I want to tell you all my use cases. I want you to teach me how to do this. Once you do that with them a few times, that can be an alternative. That is also a model that Uber and DoorDash and others are doing. It's cool for a small startup. I'd say it's not ideal for a large company, because if you're Uber, you're taking 30, 40 of your best engineers to come and train non-technical people. It's a bit of a kill. It's like taking your CTO to teach a marketing person to build a Wix website. But at your scale, that is an alternative that could work. So learn by doing, essentially.
Final question.
As a second founder, how do you think about starting from scratch alone or starting with a high exec team such as you had? Would you raise money for that?
Talent is everything. Co-founding team is everything. Is very, very important. I am spoiled in the sense that I could afford to both self-fund and match that with external funding, so I can hire co-founder material without calling them a co-founder. So in the absence of that, I would go second time with the co-founding team, because you kind of need a competing level of skills, and often 1 or 2 or 3 co-founders, you're good on one dimension, so you have superpowers, but you're lacking in others. And unless you're like very, very exceptional, the statistics and data shows it's much better when there are 2, 3 of you. And those who can do it when they're solo, not always, but often have the funding to bring in a solid team, especially team members that they've worked with in the past, and are very, very self-aware of what their strengths and weaknesses are.
I guess last one from me, if you were to share kind of one piece of advice on company building for everyone here, what would it be?
If you're early stage and the pre-product market fit, just make sure in a relentless way you're working on a white-hot problem. Most other things with your dedication, hard work, agility, and team members, whatever like you'll get to, but you need to make sure this is a white-hot burning problem that if you're B2B, that clients, businesses would essentially pay for, and then you got a chance to figure it out before competitors do.
That's been absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much. I think we all want to give you a round of applause.